Today we will look at the contribution of one of these leading Muslim women intellectuals, Layla Ahmed, especially in her very interesting book called Quiet Revolution, in which she looked at the resistance of Muslim women from being stopped to put on the hijab and how they systematically went about this resistance. The assumption was that if you stop Muslim women from putting on the veil, then that would be a way towards secularizing them or alienating them from the Islamic tradition. Muslim women were aware of this and organized themselves to resist this. And Layla Ahmed was one of the people who observed this phenomenon and wrote about it. And in fact, she herself was part of this. And at the time, she was a professor of gender studies and Islam at Harvard. He observed these changes that were taking place. Although she was allowed to do research in this area, but she constantly saw that her supervisors were trying to discourage her, going on, with the project, and even encouraging her to give up her hijab. And then, of course, she resisted and continued putting on the hijab because to her this was a matter of not only belief, but her whole identity was based on that. And of course, the veil has had a long history of debate. One of the most famous of these debates is by Fatima Mernissi, who wrote a very interesting book called the obsession of the males towards the veil. So Layla Ahmed documented all these phenomena in her very interesting book, A Quiet Revolution. It was a revolution, as we said, in the sense that Muslim women came together to completely oppose any attempt at stopping them from putting on the hijab, because they felt that this is a violation of their individual basic rights, their individual religious rights, and to live the kinds of lives that they choose to live. This became a formidable resistance. And it was felt as some kind of threat, by non-Muslim supervisors of these Muslim students. And then they saw that these were also part of this. You would imagine that if you're an elite and you are in an elite institution, then you would be afraid, of losing your privileges. But in fact, they did not really care about that. And they threw their lot with the other women. Layla Ahmed's book, A Quiet Revolution, revealed how once a group of people are determined to work in unity, then they can overcome any kind of opposition or attempts to undermine their identity or their worldview. And she was very, very successful in doing that. She was also aware, for example, of the criticism of Edward Said on Orientalists. As a fair-minded person, she actually defended the the role of some of these non-Muslim scholars. And the example that he did was that of Saad, or said, who translated Lisan al-Arab, from Arabic to English, to make it more aware, to make it more prominent in the Western world. So he said that not every Orientalist was prejudiced, or every Orientalist tried to undermine the Islamic tradition. In fact, some of them appreciated the contribution of Muslims towards certain intellectual pursuits. And this we can see in Layla Ahmed's biography of this man, Saad. We see that he was very much fascinated by this Lisan al-Arab, and that it needed to be known in the West and by Westerners. So he spent his life doing that. And in fact, that was also one of the reasons that a very prominent Muslim by the name of Owen wrote his book in defense of some of these Orientalists. And the book was titled Lust for Knowledge, meaning thirst, for knowledge. So many of these people were not there to undermine, the Islamic tradition. They only wanted to understand it, just as the Muslims themselves understood it from the inside. So he said, despite all these negative attitudes towards Orientalists, but we must not paint all the Orientalists, with one brush. Owen worked very hard to dispel the myth that everything done by Orientalists, the hidden agenda of undermining Islam and Muslims. In fact, in any case, some of these Orientalists later converted to Islam and became quite important Muslim intellectuals. And we have several examples, like Professor Kawan, who later became a professor of Arabic at the School of Oriental and African Studies. So Layla Ahmed played a very important role in writing the biographies of some of these people, and also showing the contributions of these people, that the contributions were not always negative or malicious. They were often inspired by just a love of knowledge for its own sake. I would really recommend we look at the work of Layla Ahmed, her own autobiography, and also the biographies that she wrote that help us to understand many of those conflicts and many of those debates that were taking place at the time she was living in. Layla Ahmed was of Circassian background, which actually means that she came from the Caucasus. These people, these ladies who came from the Caucasus, found their way into prominent families, and their parents were partly local people, and then they had to adopt other identities. So although they were Circassians, who came from the Caucasus, when they found themselves in places like Egypt, they were considered as Arabs, and then they adopted that identity. Because as we said, identities are not, they're just social constructions. They are not genetically determined. It is quite possible for someone to carry multiple identities because these identities are matters of choice. And Laila Ahmed is a very good example of this. And she reflects this in her own wonderful autobiography and also the biographies